Admit all. What a great button. Thank you for adding that one, teams. Um, Good morning. What a treat to be here with you. I do believe this is the fourth webinar for the technical working group. Remember, this is the technical working group. There's going to be some chat about, I don't know, technical stuff, I guess. So if that's not you and you've accidentally wandered in here thinking it's the more general webinar, we won't think anything less of you if you were to leave. That's absolutely fine. But thank you so much for joining us. We've got a packed agenda today. I'll introduce you to the cats that we have speaking as we go through. And I should add that thank you very much from John Cooper for telling us that questions can go into the chat. As in previous webinars, I will be running the Q&A. As always, I would encourage you to go onto the TTF website and look at the FAQ doc. We did update that off the back of, I think we updated that off the back of the last webinar. If we haven't, we're just about to. But there are a lot of useful answers to questions in that chat. There you go. Thank you very much, John Cooper, doing the Lord's work. I don't expect those sort of questions from this group, though. Maybe we'd get that more at the regular webinar. I'm sure you guys have all read the FAQ multiple times. First things first, let's get from John Cooper, product owner for Digital Traffic Orders, an update from the previous webinar. John.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Paul. Going to run through a few things that we've been doing since September, not least of which was the recent updates to the data specification. You will be aware that there was a glitch in version 3.2.2, and which we have addressed in version 3.2.3. I would like to thank Rui on GitHub for pointing out earlier today that we hadn't activated version 3.2.3 of the schema, though. That has now been done. We've also issued some clarifications on the GitHub about issues relating to the use of the example files that are on GitHub that were released as part of 3.2.3. These relate to making sure that the standard generic ID number to do with the DRA is edited. Otherwise, you won't be able to get your orders to validate. In this time, we have been also launching the integration environment, and Gareth's going to say a bit more about that later, so I won't go into too much detail. I would just like to say thank you to everybody that has been through the onboarding process and given us their feedback on doing that. We've learned quite a lot about how things work. There's obviously it's not a fully smooth automated process, and we have work tickets on our backlog in order to improve it. We will, of course, hopefully be going into our full private beta very soon. More on that later on in the webinar. Also worth flagging that the secondary legislation consultation is still planned for later this year. This will be at the time where the first draft secondary regulations will be tabled, and there will be an opportunity to comment on them. The FAQ has been submitted for an update. It may have been published. I need to check. It's only just been done recently. We have spent extra time on this iteration of updating the FAQ. There were a lot of new questions and other ones that needed updating, and combining questions and our answers from a number of sources. So we apologise that this took so long, but hopefully it is also there. The website has been more generally updated with details of other things that are going on, and we hope that we continue to improve our way in which we disseminate the info. The use of GitHub is picking up, and we're pleased to see that. We know that everything's not perfect at the moment in terms of the volume of usage of the service, and there may have been some glitches that have prevented that from taking off. We still have the end of integration, and I will leave it at that for the moment. We will touch on these issues relating to specific items relating to the model when John Harrod Booth and Lokesh come on later. But meanwhile, hand you back to Paul, and don't forget to ask your questions in the chat.
Thank you, John. Well, we're now going to hear from our stakeholder engagement manager, Gareth Tilley, who's going to update us on private beta onboarding. Gareth, what's the news? What's the 411, as the kids said in the 90s?
Absolutely, thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. As Paul said, I'm the stakeholder engagement manager. I just wanted to go through where we were with the integration environment, highlight the timeline for beta as well, and just walk through the process, remind folk of the process, and give an update on generally on how we're doing on onboarding. I'm sure people are very aware we've got this two-stage approach. So we've got the integration environment, which is our sandbox, our test bed, and that's very much for people to make sure that the kind of functionality is working in their service when they're trying to integrate into the private beta. That's up and running. That's been live for, I think, 3 weeks now. And then the next stage is the live environment, the production environment, which will be the live environment for private beta, and that's going live next week. So just a bit on the integration environment, an update there. It's a clone of the production environment, and as I say, it's a test environment effectively for folk to test against and upload test D-TROs, etc. against. It's probably worth highlighting we do have a limited data set in the environment because we haven't had too many people publishing to it yet, but we're hoping that over time we get a more rich data set into that integration environment, certainly for data consumers to test against. So that's, if anyone, what would really like is, kind of really highlight that if people can start to publish to their integration environment, that'd be fantastic, and do more of that, that'd be brilliant. And then there'd be, like, say, a richer data set in the environment. It's a sandbox environment, so you don't have to link if you're a digital solution provider, for example, you don't have to link your D-TROs and your service to a TRA. It's very much a test environment. And then at the moment, we've got 10 organisations fully onboarded into the integration environment, and 10 of those have completed the questionnaire around onboarding as well. So thanks for that. As you know, private beta, it is all about us getting feedback from yourselves. It's about that user research to get the service as good as possible before we go to a public service. So I can only thank the 5 who've done that already, the questionnaire. And if others, when you receive these kind of questionnaires and user research from us, it's great if you can spend a little bit of time to complete that for us. That really does help us out in terms of improving the service. I just wanted to highlight, I think most have realised this and know this, the process for onboarding is managed, this is kind of the steps I'll walk through. It's managed by customer service officers, so that's largely me and the rest of the team. So some of the steps aren't automated, unfortunately. So yeah, there will be a time delay around some of them, unfortunately. I just wanted to highlight that. But I think most people realise that, and we're trying to be as reactive as possible. You know, turn any authorizations and authentication through as quickly as possible. So I just wanted to update on stage 2. So before people are you know, kind of onboarding to the full environment, the live environment, we would like you to onboard and test in the integration environment first. Stage 2 for private beta, we're going to be launching that next week. It is the live environment. It should only be used for real data, and it will require people to be linking TROs back to traffic regulation authorities. It's a very similar process. It's the same process, in fact, that people would have gone through for onboarding to the integration environment. We'll have to repeat all those stages, unfortunately, including authentication of people's emails, because it's a totally separate environment. But it will be one that people have already done before, having completed that for the integration environment. Yeah, as I say, I just wanted to highlight, I think people know this stage 4-step process by now. We issue the documentation. First, there's an account creation stage, which verifies people's email addresses. And then the second stage is around creation of the app itself. As I say, the CSO, there's a bit of validation and a verification after creation of the email address. So we'll, as I say, we'll be trying to turn that around as quickly as possible. I think, Paul, that was all I wanted to highlight around the environments. I think it's over to John Howard Booth next.
Well, I'll be the judge of that, Gareth. We've got a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Question number 1 is from George, saying there's only one record in the service. What's going on? I would say that, to be fair, private beta hasn't actually started yet, but I think it's still a valid point. We were talking this morning in stand-up about there being a large number of records that haven't made it in, and why they fail in validation. So I think we're getting close to the stage, George, where stuff is going to be coming in. I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that, Gareth.
Yeah, can only echo what you said. And what we'd like to do is certainly encourage people to be publishing to the service to make that data set richer for the likes of yourself, George, and other data consumers to be able to test against in a more full manner before we launch the full environment.
And then, thank you, Gareth. Then the other question is, well, it's not really a question, more of a statement, but not yet been invited to anything, someone says. Thanks, Tim. Forgive me for my lack of knowledge, Gareth. Are we inviting people, or do people kind of apply?
So certainly welcome for people to participate. The best way is to go through the D-TRO inbox. So we'll put that email up at the end, but it's just dtro@dft.gov.uk. Highlight to us that you want to be involved in private beta, and we can issue you with the right documentation.
Got you. John Cooper.
I think it's possibly worth mentioning that the difference between the integration onboarding again and then into private beta onboarding. For authorities that are working with a digital solution provider, it hasn't really been necessary for them to have onboarded in integration. But as we get into private beta, there is a direct link up between the DSP and the TRA. So there may be a bigger need for those authorities that are interested and to be able to sign up to do so. Tim, if you're interested and we haven't been in touch, just drop us a line. We can sort it out.
Well, we've got Tim's details. We'll drop you a line, Tim. Don't call us. We will call you. We also, is it worth saying, John, that we had some fun with it's not an automated process, guys. So there's a human that needs to kind of approve you. I can understand why people think it's permanent, automatic though, John.
Yeah, we noticed that most people assume in the first phase when getting their email registered that it would happen automatically. This did have to be approved by a person though. So they'd have to be around monitoring the mailbox, see that it's happened, get to it, and that just because of the way things work didn't happen instantaneously. We know this is there's like a slowing down factor in the process, and further automation improvements are on the backlog. How we can smooth this out.
Well put, yeah. I know what it's like these days. If you don't get that confirmation email within a minute or whatever, you think like, oh God, I'm not going to get it. It's going to expire and all that sort of stuff, like it does when you're trying to get back into your supermarket basket or whatever it might be. So yeah, do bear with us on those, but automation is on our to-do list. Thank you, John, and indeed, thank you, Gareth. Well, it's my great pleasure to hand over to a man who needs no introduction, John Harrod Booth. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, Paul. So I get to talk to everybody about where we are with the data specification, and I'm going to go through that. I think on the original agenda slide it had Lokesh dealing with some of that, but I think I'll get to do the lot. So, three real topics to discuss. So Gareth, if you can go on to the next slide. Should also say that I've been the doorkeeper into this webinar, so I should keep an eye that there's nobody stood at the door waiting to get in. So where are we now? We issued data release so the data specification release 323 last month. Sorry, 322 last month, and quite rightly, people spotted there were some inconsistencies in there. It's taken us a while to try to ensure that we've produced something which is more consistent, and that's flowing across a number of different artifacts, and so it's not a trivial exercise. We are taking that on board. You can see at the bottom an illustration that there is a backlog of activities that we want to try and introduce. We've dealt with the most urgent, and then we've dealt with trying to ensure that we're dealing with those matters of consistency. So we have issued the specification release 323. We are about to issue today the final pieces of that, which is the interface control documents. We were hoping to get those out before this webinar, but the quality control side has just put a break on that, but they will come out today. So we've been working hard to try to drive greater consistency in what we're producing. One of the primary topics that arose, which I know is a matter of contention, is that in this version of the data specification and for private beta at the moment, we have an approach which uses standardized ways of encoding data, well-known text, and is base referenced against Ordnance Survey British National Grid. They are matters that are there and will be discussed and reviewed moving forward, but that is the basis of what we are on at the moment. Next slide, please. As Paul and John have done, I do thank people for commenting. We got comments through the GitHub repository, and that enables us to respond as fast as we can. We spent a bit of time when those came in to understand what the issues were and why issues were occurring, and hopefully we're in a position now where you should find a much more consistent set of documents and artifacts being produced. We are, of course, trying to deploy this, and it's relatively complicated. We recognise that there are demands coming in that we are trying to satisfy. So, for example, there's a demand come in to say, could you please supply more sample TROs into the service, and including in that some samples of temporary TROs, and that is something we're trying to address. But the team is not unlimited, and so we're trying to manage the resources in the way to get the most critical items dealt with first. Top right corner, you notice that there is a reference. So we want to labour the point that when you raise comment through GitHub, obviously that's visible to everybody who's looking at it, and that's our preferred mechanism for comment and issues to be raised, and we will address those as we go. Next slide, please. So we've issued a set of sample files. We've actually taken down the 322 sample files just to make sure that it doesn't cause too much confusion. And we've issued a set of sample files at the moment, which are synthetic data. They're not fully representative of real TROs, but they're there to show how we would expect different geometries to be handled. Just part of that process is, obviously, we've been going through the process of ensuring that there's validation between the JSON schema itself and the underlying draft specification, JSON specification, and also from the JSON schema across to the sample files. If you try to run a sample file against the schema using an online validator, plenty are available, you have to make an edit to the sample files. The sample files are actually what come out, what result in the internals of the service, and so you need to make an edit to the sample files that takes away. Sorry, my dogs have just decided to join me in a noisy fashion. You need to make an edit that takes away a small amount of text at the top and one curly bracket at the bottom of those sample files, and at that point you should find on the online validators that they validate. We've also had issues raised with people saying, I've tried to run these sample files through a validation and they're failing. The sample files at the moment contain references to TRAs, to a local authority, which is not real. And part of the validation checks is that we are looking for entries that are real. So you will need to replace the TRA codes where they exist in those files with something that is real. So in the case of TFL, that's replacing it with 20. And in the case of highways, national highways, it's 11. So if you don't know your own SWA code, SWA code, please look on the internet, very easy to access and find, or if not, drop us a line and I'm sure we can supply it back if that's necessary. We will be producing, and the D-TRO service necessarily will have a slightly broader list of SWA codes, because we do have some authorities who are not Streetworks authorities that can create TRAs, and so we need to create our own version, but it will be synchronized with the SWA list that's already out there in the wild. Next slide, please. So just to touch on the spatial coding again, so fully well recognised that there have been some comments in previous webinars, and it is a matter that we are looking into necessarily for the purposes of getting a specification out there that you can work to at the moment. We're sticking with what we have at the moment. So the coding expects spatial coordinates to be referenced using WKT style standardized coding and using British National Grid as the base coordinate referencing system. And the examples you can see in the table are examples of how that coding would look. Hopefully we've managed to clarify in the specification and the sample files that approach. We are looking at other approaches to try to deal with that, and indeed we're happy to talk to local authorities and DSPs around that topic, and we'll be doing so actively over the next few weeks. But to get private beta launch, we really need to baseline on a way of doing things. So that's where we stand on that. Next slide, please. Just a reminder from previous technical webinar. So one of the topics that DFT would like to get your input into and on is a question around terms and definitions. So we have produced content which is available on GitHub, which shows all of the entries that exist in the data model. From what you can see on the screen, we've got lists that deal with regulation type, vehicle type, these sorts of things. And we try to associate every entry that exists within the data model with an equivalent legal definition. That's not always very easy. And it's useful to get input on two levels. One is when you look through each of those lists, are there things that you think are missing or indeed should be removed? Or if you think, well, I have a definition that I think would be applicable for something which perhaps hasn't got a standardized definition already, then we'd welcome your input. And I think that's important as a step moving for the future. It's not desperately urgent right now, but it is a matter that we collectively will have to deal with in the future. Next slide, please. And this is just an illustration that I used before. So if you dive into the vehicle type table, you will see column D has all of the entries that you find in the data model. And where it's been able to, we've provided standardized definitions against those, column E. But in some cases, we don't have those things. In some cases, we may have more than one. And so it's useful to get input back from the local authorities on their view of these things. It's more linking across to your legal teams, I suspect, but it is a very useful area to get input into. Right, and that was all I was intending to say. So I suspect there may be questions, but I'll go back to you, Paul.
Well, funnily enough, I had a question. So it was just a small thing, but you were talking about TFL being 20. If they gave us 0, 0 to 20, could we handle it? And if they didn't, can we handle it? Because SWAR codes are normally 4 digits.
I wouldn't wish to presuppose what my dev colleagues would say. I suspect that the system would expect in that instance to receive 20, not 0020.
I'm only raising this because padded zeros caught us out on Street Manager literally the other week. So it's just a useful heads up for us, really. I think Lokesh might answer that question, but I'm throwing over to him anyway to give us an update on the geometry specification, apparently. Lokesh,
so
the floor is yours.
Cheers. So JHB did a great job to cover that, but I was just going to step in on the question, which is, yes, it'd just be 20 in that case, so it doesn't need the padded zeros, and then we can open it up now to other questions.
Thanks, Lokesh. Always a little treat for me to almost sound like I know what I'm talking about technically. So thank you. You know what, guys? We don't actually have any more questions. So it seems like we have been clear and concise in our communication. So that is a great job, if you ask me. So that leads us to what's down on the agenda as further information. Gareth Tilley, is there anything else people need to know?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that in terms of there's a couple of conferences we'll be presenting out and attending. I know some people are going to Highways UK and they've already contacted us about that. So we're presenting on the first day, that's the 16th of October. And then there's also the TTF Autumn Conference we'll be at as well. We are lining up a load of kind of engagement sessions for beta, and that's very much around the user research side, as I said. And we'll be continuing that kind of webinars and seminars. The launch meeting is next Tuesday, and people who were involved, that should have gone out already. John issued that earlier in the week. And then just in terms of further information, I think people are pretty familiar with this list already. We've got the Transport Technology Forum website, and that's got our kind of regular announcements and includes our FAQ list. It's also got details on the YouTube playlist as well. If there's anything you need, any information you need, we've got the D-TRO email address as well. So that's just dtro@dft.gov.uk. I think that was all I was going to cover on further information, Paul.
I mean, what more is there to cover? That was pretty
Indeed.
comprehensive, if you ask me. Do check out the YouTube channel, guys. Come for the D-TRO videos, stay for the Street Manager ones. A new video has just dropped from that side of the piece. Nice to be able to kill two birds with one stone. Let's hear from John Harrod Booth before we depart. John.
I was just going to note that George dropped a question into chat.
Indeed, indeed. Did you wish to answer that question?
I don't think I'm the right person to answer.
I can. So George, I think there's been a bug which our dev team spotted, hence why it's stopped the search this morning. So I can check in with them to understand the status of it, and then give an update on when it'll be back up. Okay.
Lovely stuff, Lokesh. Thank you very much. There's also a question in the chat about like an idiot's guide. So I'm just replying to that one, recommending that people, if you're starting from scratch, as it were, then there's loads in that FAQ. There's also something called the Guide for Decision Makers. And you should find both of those on the TTF website. If you go onto the TTF website, you will literally, D-TRO's pretty prominently placed, but John Cooper has given you the link there as well, which I couldn't do whilst I was talking. Well, if there are any other questions, as always, just drop an email to dtro@dft.gov.uk. I think that is working quite well. But yeah, thanks very much for coming along, guys. Maybe see you at the main webinar whenever that is. Take care of yourselves and see you at the top. Bye-bye.